I'm Olivia Matthews, 32 years old, and at my brother's wedding they seated me at a table in the kitchen next to the staff while my mother smiled in the front row and my father raised his glass beside the Caldwells. Jason never looked my way, not even once during the vows. Later they would call it an oversight, but that night I realized just how intentional it all was. I didn't say a word. I just left my heels echoing across the catering hall floor. What they didn't know was that I still held the signature that controlled their biggest business deal, and in 2 weeks' time I'd use it. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to fight for the respect your own family denied you. I wasn't raised to be bitter. In our house, my father believed in hard work, Sunday church, and never making a scene. My mother taught me to say thank you, even when someone forgot my name. We weren't wealthy growing up, but my father built Matthews Construction from a garage operation into a respected regional company. I was proud of what he built, and proud to come home after college instead of chasing a job in the city like everyone else expected me to. Jason was always the one people noticed first. Tall, smiling, natural charm. He could talk a banker into doubling our line of credit without opening a spreadsheet. Meanwhile, I was the one staying late, balancing the books, quietly keeping us in the black when the market dipped. Your brother brings in the business, my father liked to say. That's just as important. Behind the scenes. That's where I lived. By the time I became CFO, our annual revenue had doubled. I'd renegotiated contracts, cut waste, and created our first profit-sharing plan. But when Jason got engaged to Vanessa Caldwell, suddenly none of that seemed to matter. Vanessa was lovely in that way. Socialites are polished, poised, always 5 steps ahead in the conversation. Her family owned Caldwell Properties, a luxury real estate group that controlled most of the upper market in our region. For 3 years, Matthews Construction had been their preferred partner. I'd negotiated that contract myself. At dinner the night they announced the engagement, my mother clapped her hands and called it a perfect match, romantic and strategic. I just smiled and took another bite of my salad. From that night on, things began to shift. When I offered to help with the wedding planning, Vanessa declined gently but firmly. We've hired professionals, she said, then started calling me twice a week for obscure family trivia to include in the slideshow. My mother told me I should take the opportunity to get out from behind my spreadsheets and meet someone. I was 32, single, and somehow that disqualified everything I'd built. The engagement party was held at the Caldwell Estate, an oceanside property with floor-to-ceiling glass walls and staff in black tie uniforms. I wore my best dress navy blue with soft pleats. Caroline Caldwell looked me over like I was an invoice she didn't quite recognize. "How professional you look," she said, her smile so thin it vanished as fast as it came. That evening I stood on the terrace for air and overheard Caroline telling a guest, "The Matthews have potential, but that sister, she's more numbers than presence." Vanessa laughed and said, "We'll bring them up to standard." They didn't know I was listening, and even if they had, I don't think it would have stopped them. The closer we got to the wedding, the more invisible I became. No bridal party invite, no family photo consultation, just quiet expectations to show up, smile, and support. I asked Jason to lunch 2 months before the wedding. I tried to tell him I was worried. About our dad, about the business, about where I fit into any of it. He barely looked up from his watch. "You're overthinking again, Liv," he said. "Not everything's a threat." But it was. And I felt it coming. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early, hair done, dress pressed, ready for the photos my mother had insisted I not miss. Instead, I was handed a clipboard and told to coordinate with vendors. "Vanessa says you're good with details," the planner explained. The family photos had already been taken. No one had called me. I didn't cry. I found the florist, fixed the missing order, and missed the champagne toast. When I finally reached the reception hall, my name wasn't at the family tables, or the friends' tables. A waiter checked the list and pointed toward the kitchen annex. That's where they'd placed me next to the wedding planner and the photographer's assistant. No explanation. No apology. And still I stayed. But by the end of the night, I would walk out of that room with a decision that would change everything. Jason didn't even flinch when I asked to meet him the weekend after his wedding. He just said, "Sure, before dinner. I've got half an hour." We met at a cafe near the river where we used to get lunch during high school breaks. He didn't order anything. I didn't sit down. I told him there was still time, that if there was any part of him that wanted to explain what happened at the wedding, I was ready to hear it. He looked past me and said, "This is business, Olivia. It's not personal." But it had been personal when they stuck my place card by the kitchen doors, when my brother didn't stop them, when he looked away instead of speaking up. "She thought you'd be more comfortable there," he said, "away from all the couples." And I knew in that moment exactly how far gone he was. "You let her humiliate me," I said. "And you did nothing." He didn't answer. That night, I stood in front of my mirror and buttoned a navy jacket over my black dress. It was the same jacket I wore the day I signed the Caldwell contract, the one Jason took credit for. The same one I'd wear again before the sun came up. I looked myself in the eye and said, "No more kitchen tables." By dawn, I was already at the office. I had triple-checked the termination clause the night before. I ran it past Patricia again just after 6. At 7:30, I walked into Caldwell Properties and left the signed termination letter on Richard Caldwell's desk. No words, no note, just the envelope. Back at Matthews Construction, I called an emergency board meeting for 9:00 a.m. As CFO, I had that authority in urgent financial matters. This one qualified. By 8:45, board members were settling into their seats. Some looked confused, a few looked nervous. My father walked in and glanced around like he wasn't sure he'd entered the right room. "Olivia, what's going on?" he asked. "The Caldwell showcase starts in an hour. I told him there was something we needed to address first." When everyone was seated, I stood at the head of the table. Jason's chair was empty. I passed around folders with carefully labeled tabs, financial records, projected losses, draft merger documents. I told them about the $2 million Jason had transferred out of our operating account, about the holding company, about the funneling into Caldwell projects unapproved, undocumented. My father's face turned gray. The room filled with low murmurs as people flipped pages. Then Jason barged in, red in the face. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "You're blowing this up an hour before our biggest event." I told him what I had told the board, that I was presenting evidence of misconduct, that I had authority to act. "You don't have the authority to terminate a contract of that size," he shouted. I didn't need to answer. Patricia stood and read the clause aloud, the one I had fought for months ago. Section 17, subsection C, termination permitted in the event of merger or corporate restructuring with CFO or CEO sign-off. I had signed that morning. Jason stepped toward me. Sam Torres blocked his path. "Fix this," Vanessa hissed as she marched into the room, Richard Caldwell at her side. "You told me your sister wouldn't be a problem." She turned to Jason, her voice tight. 200 people are waiting for us. You need to fix this now." "Mr. Caldwell," I said calmly, "since you're here, perhaps you'd like to answer questions about the merger documents, the ones drafted without board approval, the ones that eliminate nearly every department head in this room." Richard's face twitched. "We've had an agreement with your father for months." Everyone looked at my father. "I was trying to protect the company," he said softly. "My health, I needed to plan ahead." Sam shook his head. "You call that planning?" Jason interrupted. "This wasn't embezzlement. It was a strategic investment." Emily Reeves, our marketing director, held up her copy. "Jason, this says your position would be ceremonial. You wouldn't even have signing authority." "Did you read this?" Jason turned to Richard. "You said I'd be running construction. Details to be finalized," Richard replied, waving a hand. "You'd have a title, a role. That's not the point." "No," I said. "The point is Matthews Construction would have become nothing but a name." Richard's voice rose. "We had a deal, not with the board," Eleanor Wright said firmly. "Nothing was authorized." Vanessa's voice cut through. "You said this was handled," she snapped at Jason. "You said she'd stay quiet." He didn't answer. My father rubbed his temple, then looked at me. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "I did," I said. "You told me to accept a consulting role, to let go gracefully." He winced. "The kitchen table," he said quietly. "Was that true?" I nodded. Jason looked away. My father stood up slower than he used to. His shoulders sagged, but his voice was steady. "Then it's decided. The merger's off. The contract is canceled. Olivia made the right call." "You'll regret this," Richard snapped. "You don't know who you're up against." "We do," I said. "That's why we're not selling our company to you." Security arrived to escort them out. Vanessa didn't say a word, but the look she gave Jason said more than she ever had. When the room cleared, my father walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything." He pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in a long while, I let him. Jason stayed behind. When it was just the three of us left, he sat down heavily. "What happens now?" he asked. That afternoon, the Caldwell showcase was canceled. Industry phones lit up with speculation, rumors, warnings. Caldwell Properties stock took a hit. Investors demanded explanations. Meanwhile, I met with Michael Norton. He moved fast. Within days, Norton International had filled the gap Caldwell left behind. Their terms were stronger, their ethics better, and they treated every meeting like a partnership, not a power play. By the third day, I arrived at the office to find my mother waiting in my chair. Her face was pale. "How could you do this?" she asked. "Dad's health is worse," she said. "The stress this may have taken months off what time he has left." I stood by the door and listened. "You humiliated this family," she said. "Destroyed Jason's marriage, undermined a partnership that could have secured our future." "They were going to replace me," I said. "They were going to erase everything we built." Her eyes narrowed. "So your pride was worth all this?" I didn't answer. She stood up. "I'm staying with Jason. Your father's made his choice. Now he can deal with the consequences." As she left, my phone buzzed. The server had been breached overnight. Someone tried to access private files. I called Patricia. Then I called IT. Then I closed my door and sat down. Everything had changed. But the fight wasn't over, and I had no idea what was coming next. That night I stayed late at the office. The server breach had been blocked, but the attempt itself said more than it needed to. Someone was desperate. Someone didn't care if they were caught. I changed all my passwords, made backups of every financial file, and moved the signed termination documents into my private safe. I wasn't taking any more chances. The next morning, 2 project managers gave notice. Both had connections to Caldwell Properties. By noon, I'd received a notice from the Department of Labor. An anonymous complaint had triggered a review of our hiring and compensation records. Patricia called it a nuisance. I called it expected. Within a week, 3 subcontractors pulled out of upcoming projects. When we reached out to replacements, we found ourselves suddenly at the bottom of their wait lists. Every step forward came with something else breaking loose behind us. In the middle of it all, my father returned to the office. His doctor had told him to rest. He came anyway. Not every day, and not for long, but enough for people to notice. He'd sit in his office with the door open, nodding as people passed. Sometimes he'd stay just an hour, sometimes longer. He didn't say much to me those first few days, but every time I looked up, he was watching. Not with disappointment, not with resentment, just watching. Jason stayed gone. His desk sat untouched. One of the interns said they saw him at the hotel bar down the street, same place every afternoon. I didn't reach out. On Monday morning, a manila envelope appeared on my desk. No name, no return address. Inside was a thumb drive and a single sticky note. "You deserve to know the truth." I had it scan it for viruses, then opened it myself. The files were emails dated sorted and clear. Vanessa had begun seeing Jason with an objective in mind. Target acquired one email read, "Exactly as described, eager, insecure, eager to please." In later exchanges, Richard discussed plans to accelerate the merger timeline before my father's health declined too far. One line stood out like a knife. "The sister will be offered a face-saving exit. She'll be gone in 6 months. No signatures, no sender information." But the headers looked real. It confirmed the emails matched Caldwell Properties' domain. I printed a few pages and took them home with me. That evening, my father called and asked if I could come by. When I arrived, he was alone in his study, the fireplace on despite the warm night. "Your mother's still with Jason," he said as I stepped inside. There were photos on the bookshelf behind him. Jason's graduation, my first award ceremony, the old truck from his first job site. He motioned to the chair across from him. "I've been going over things," he said quietly. "About the business, about you, about what I've done." I didn't say anything. "I see it now," he said. How I let Jason believe charm was enough. How I expected you to carry the weight without recognition. I passed him the emails. He read them in silence, then set them down and stared at the flames. I've already changed the succession plan, he said. The company's yours when I'm gone. Jason keeps his shares, but the authority majority rights, they're yours. I didn't expect that. Not yet. It's done, he said. The lawyers filed it last week. Before I could speak, the front door slammed. Jason's voice echoed from the hallway. Dad, we need to talk. He stopped when he saw me. What is she doing here? He asked, his voice rough. I asked her to come, my father said, and I'm glad you're here too. Jason looked tired. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. You destroyed everything, he said, turning to me. My marriage, my reputation, my future. I slid the emails across the coffee table. He scanned them, then sank down onto the couch. She used me, he whispered. Said I was her fresh start. She said a lot, I replied. None of it true. He pressed his hand to his face. Her lawyers say I violated the prenup, that she gets half my shares, that I'm nothing. You're not nothing, our father said. But you need to stop chasing what you think you're owed. Start building something for yourself. Jason didn't answer. When he left the room, my father leaned forward and took my hand. Whatever happens, he said, I want you to know I'm proud of you. I should have said it sooner. I nodded. That night driving home, the streetlights felt softer somehow. Like the worst part might finally be over, but it wasn't. 3 months after the boardroom confrontation, I arrived at the office to find a young man waiting by my door. He stood as I approached. Ms. Matthews, he asked. I'm Michael Caldwell, Vanessa's brother. I stopped. My assistant let me through. He added quickly. I told her it was important. He followed me into my office. I didn't sit down. I know you have no reason to trust me, he began, but I'm not here on behalf of my father or sister. Then why are you here? I asked. Because you need to know what's coming. Caldwell Properties is in serious trouble, and they're about to make it yours. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the desk. This has everything: projections, loan documents, partnership drafts. Without your company, they won't last 6 months. I didn't reach for it. You expect me to believe this? I asked. I expect you to verify it, he said, and to know I'm not like them. I never have been. He stood, nodded once, and left without waiting for another word. I handed the drive to a T. The documents were real. At that moment, my assistant knocked. Urgent call, she said. Your father's been taken to the hospital. I grabbed my keys and didn't ask for details. In the waiting room, my mother and Jason sat across from one another in silence. The doctor said it was the beginning of the end. Weeks, not months. He wanted to see all of us together. We entered his room quietly. He looked so small in that hospital bed. But when he saw us, he smiled. My whole family, he whispered, in one room again. He took our hands one by one and said what none of us had been ready to hear. To Jason, he said, You care deeply. That's your gift. Don't waste it trying to be like me. To me, he said, You kept this company alive. Not me, not Jason. You. And to my mother, he said, You favored one child and failed the other. It hurt them both. She cried quietly beside him. No one interrupted. When he drifted into sleep, the nurse ushered us out. We didn't speak. Not in the hallway, not in the car. Later that evening, I heard a knock at my apartment door. Michael Caldwell stood there pale. I'm sorry to come again, he said, but you need to know my father's filing suit tomorrow. He's liquidating assets. He's desperate. And Jason? I asked. Michael hesitated. He called Vanessa. She told Richard your father is near the end. They're accelerating the attack. I didn't respond. He looked down. I've watched my family do terrible things. I've kept quiet. But not anymore. He turned to go, then paused. If there's a place for someone like me, someone who wants to do it right, I'd be grateful. I didn't give him an answer that night, but I watched him leave and wondered if maybe something good could still grow from everything that had been broken. The next morning, I arrived at the house just after 7. Jason was already in the kitchen, hunched over a mug of coffee like he hadn't slept. He didn't say much at first, just nodded toward the chair across from him. Mom's upstairs getting dressed, he said. voice low. "The hospital called. Dad had a rough night. I poured myself a cup but didn't sit. I waited." He finally looked up. "I didn't tell Vanessa anything about the company," he said. I needed to talk to someone. She called her father within the hour," I said. "He's already preparing to file." Jason pushed back from the table hard enough to rattle the ceramic. "I didn't know," he said. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." I stayed quiet. "She was my wife," he added. "Or I thought she was." His voice cracked on the last word. I softened. "Your feelings were real, Jason, even if hers weren't." He looked up at me exhausted. "How are you not falling apart? I'm just staying focused." He nodded slowly, then said something I didn't expect. "At the wedding, when they put you in the kitchen, I saw you leave. I told myself you were overreacting, but I was embarrassed. Not by you, by me." We didn't say anything else before leaving for the hospital. The doctor met us in the hallway. "He's stable," she said, "but it's time to begin preparing. Comfort care. Focus on quality of life." We followed her to the room. My father looked smaller than I remembered, worn thin but alert. "Good," he said, smiling faintly as we entered. "All three of you." My mother went to his side. Jason and I stood back. "No more pretending," he said. "We don't have time." He looked at Jason first. "I failed you. I thought I was supporting you, but I was making things too easy. I wanted to give you everything I never had, but I should have helped you build something of your own." Jason's hands clenched at his sides. He didn't interrupt. Then my father turned to me. "Olivia, I've said pieces of this before, but I need your mother to hear it too. You built this company. Not me, not your brother, you." My mother turned her head sharply but said nothing. He took her hand. "Margaret, I love you, but you favored Jason from the start, and that left Olivia carrying more than her share. It wasn't fair. Not to either of them." Her lips parted as if to object, but she closed them again and nodded. "I'm not asking for us to pretend none of this happened," he said. "I'm asking you to try, to be better, together, because I won't be here to hold it anymore." We each gave our quiet promise, none of us trusting our voices. Later that evening, William Carter arrived, my father's oldest friend, his first job site boss. He walked in like he owned the room, then hugged each of us in turn. "I've got friends on the night staff," he said. "I'll sit with him tonight. You all look like you need rest." Out in the parking lot, the silence between us felt different. Not cold, just uncertain. "I'll stay at the house," my mother said, "in case the hospital calls." Jason nodded. "I'll come too." They both looked at me. "I'll be by in the morning," I said. "Call me if anything changes." I drove home. The sky had turned overcast. The city lights looked dim through the windshield. Michael Caldwell was waiting in the lobby. He stood when I entered. "I heard about your father," he said. "I'm sorry." He followed me into the elevator. "There's something else," he added. "My father's filing suit in the morning. Breach of contract, fraud, everything he can throw. It's weak but loud." I pressed the button for my floor. "He's pulling money from personal assets," Michael continued. "He's serious." "And your brother? What about Jason? He called Vanessa last night, emotional, said some things about your father's condition. She called my father. That's why they're moving fast." We reached my floor. I didn't open the door yet. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Michael looked down at the carpet. "Because I should have done something sooner, and because I don't want to be like them." He didn't wait for an answer, just nodded, and turned to leave. The next morning I arrived at the house just after sunrise. Jason was in the kitchen again. His shirt was wrinkled. The coffee pot was already half empty. "I didn't mean for this," he said as I walked in. "I didn't mean for any of it." He looked up. "How do you keep going?" "I don't stop to think about it," I said. "I just do what needs doing." He rubbed his eyes. "When they put you at that kitchen table, and you didn't cry, didn't argue, you just left. I handled it." He nodded. "I remember thinking you looked more composed than anyone else there." Before I could respond, my mother entered. "We should go," she said quietly. "The doctor wants to speak with all of us." At the hospital, the news was what we'd expected. The end was near, days, maybe less. William was still there. He greeted us and stepped aside. "I want all of you," my father said when we entered. "Stay close." He held our hands one at a time, eyes steady, voice quiet. "Olivia, you know what to do. Don't lose yourself in it. Let people in. Jason, find your way. Not mine, not hers. Yours." "Margaret," he said softly, "they'll need you, both of them. Be the mother they still deserve." He paused, then added, "There's a letter in my desk. Bottom right drawer. Read it together." We nodded. The machines beeped quietly behind him as his breathing grew shallow. Later that day, Jason returned to the house. My mother followed not long after. I went home alone and waited. My father passed just before sunset 2 days later. We were all there. Jason on one side of the bed, our mother on the other. I stood by the window, watching the light shift across the hospital floor as the machines grew quieter. William Carter stayed until the end. He didn't say much, just held Dad's hand and kept his other on Jason's shoulder. When the final breath came, no one moved right away. My mother lowered her head. Jason gripped the bed rail with both hands. I reached for the call button but paused for a beat before pressing it. The nurses entered gently. One turned off the monitor. The other pulled the curtain just slightly, not enough to hide us from each other, just enough to soften the moment. The next few days were filled with everything grief demands. Arrangements, phone calls, flowers, the obituary draft that no one could agree on. Then, just like he'd asked, we met in his study on the third evening. My mother sat at his desk, her fingers trembling as she opened the envelope he'd left. Jason and I sat opposite her side by side. She unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "My dear family," it began, "if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever's next. I hope it's quiet." The words that followed were measured, firm, regretful. To our mother, "You protected Jason, but in doing so, you kept him from growing and kept Olivia from being seen. To Jason, the ease with which I gave you things prevented you from finding your own strength. But you still can. To me, you carried more than your share. You excelled despite that. But strength isn't just endurance. It's knowing when to let others help." He ended with, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means deciding to stop carrying what can't be changed, for each other, for yourselves." When she finished, none of us spoke. Jason leaned forward and rubbed his eyes. "I think I'll stay at the house for a bit," he said, "just until things settle." My mother nodded. Then Jason turned to me. "I want to come back to the company, not to my old title. I didn't earn that. But I want to help. Maybe with client relationships, not events or handshakes. Actual work." I met his eyes. There was no performance in them this time. "We need someone to handle ongoing client touchpoints," I said, "checking in on sites, following up on delivery targets. No fluff." "I'd like that," he said quietly. Our mother straightened in her chair. "Olivia, I owe you an apology. For years of them, actually." I waited. I didn't see what I didn't want to see. I let Jason have the benefit of the doubt and held you to standards I never placed on him. I was wrong. She took a breath and added, "But I'd like to do better if you'll let me." It wasn't a perfect moment. There were too many sharp edges still raw, but it was a start. I nodded. The next morning I returned to the office early. The building felt different now, quieter somehow. Michael Caldwell showed up just after 9. "I've resigned," he said before I could even speak. "Officially. My father's furious, says I'm disloyal." "What do you want now?" I asked. "I studied environmental design and marketing. I've spent 5 years watching my family destroy every good opportunity they had. I'd like to work somewhere that does things differently." I studied him for a long moment. "We're expanding our sustainable building division," I said. "It's a growing area. We could use someone who knows both the ideas and the language." He straightened. "Really?" "Send me your resume," I said. "We'll make it official." As he left, I watched him go with a strange feeling I couldn't quite name, something between irony and relief. The following week, Richard Caldwell's lawsuit landed. It was loud, expensive, designed to create confusion and drain resources. Our attorneys called it baseless, but said it would take time to unwind. In the meantime, word of the attempted merger and the boardroom confrontation spread. Some partners stepped back, a few projects were delayed, but most stayed. Within weeks, our team finalized a multi-site deal with Norton International. Their president, Michael Norton, shook my hand and said, "I've waited 10 years to work with your company. Glad it's finally with the right Matthews." Jason found a rhythm of his own, visiting job sites, checking in with vendors, no flash, no speeches, just showing up where it mattered. Our mother shifted her focus to the company's charitable foundation. She started organizing scholarships, apprenticeship programs, and community partnerships in my father's name. One afternoon, she stopped by my office and left a binder of proposals on my desk. For the board, she said, "No pressure, just thought we might build something beyond balance sheets." It felt like something was healing inch by inch. 3 months passed. The lawsuit was dismissed. Caldwell Properties collapsed under its own weight. Investors pulled out. Richard was removed from leadership. Vanessa left the state. According to a friend in real estate, she was managing open houses in Scottsdale. Jason received her divorce filing on what would have been their 3-month anniversary. At the office, I started seeing a new kind of email in my inbox. Not complaints, not warnings, but messages from small firms, local architects, suppliers, asking if Matthews Construction had openings, if we were expanding. 1 year after my father's death, we hosted the first Thomas Matthews Memorial Benefit. The ballroom was full. Clients, contractors, former employees, even some competitors. I gave a short speech. My father believed that success meant nothing unless you shared it. Tonight we extend our family by building opportunity. From the podium, I saw my mother at our company table, composed, but softer. Jason sat beside her, hands folded neatly in his lap. And across the room near the display of student design projects, Michael Caldwell stood quietly talking with a city planner. After the applause, I stepped aside to take a breath. An investment banker approached me with a practiced smile. "Ms. Matthews, congratulations. And more than that, Westfield Development is interested in an acquisition conversation. Substantial numbers, brand protection, generous terms." I let him finish. "Matthews Construction isn't for sale," I said. "Not at any price." He smiled tighter. "Everything has a price." "Not this," I said. Jason found me after. He handed me a glass of champagne and raised his own. "Third offer this month?" "Fourth," I said. We tapped glasses and watched the room. Our mother waved Michael over to join their table. That alone was a sign of how far we'd come. As the event wound down, I found myself by the windows again. The city stretched beyond the glass. Somewhere out there, new projects were already underway. The ones that mattered, the ones we'd chosen. The week after the memorial, the office settled into a quiet rhythm. For the first time in over a year, there was no major crisis to manage. Just work to do projects to deliver calls to return. Jason arrived every morning by 8:30. He brought his own coffee now. He didn't hover around my office or ask for updates, he just got to work. Job site visits, vendor calls, client check-ins. One afternoon, I passed him in the hallway, going over blueprints with one of the junior engineers. No audience, no cameras, just steady hands and clear questions. Our mother came in twice a week, mostly to meet with the foundation team. She reviewed scholarship applicants, met with community leaders, and insisted we set aside a portion of every major project for local workforce initiatives. At first, I stayed out of it. I kept my focus on internal systems and contract negotiations. But one morning, she stopped by my office and placed a folder on my desk. "This one," she said, "deserves a second look. She reminds me of someone I used to underestimate." She didn't wait for a reply. Around the same time, Michael Caldwell's title was updated from consultant to director of sustainability. His team grew from 2 interns to a full department with active projects in 3 states. He rarely spoke about his family, and when he did, it was only in brief remarks. But his work was solid, his proposals thoughtful. Still, the lawsuit hovered. Though it had been dismissed, the damage lingered. Legal fees, contractor hesitation. A few clients kept their distance, unsure if the dust had truly settled. Then came the anonymous tips. Audits, delayed payments, supply hiccups. We tightened internal controls, rewrote vendor contracts, rebuilt slowly. One morning, Marcus Chen, our longtime accountant, stopped by my office holding a letter from the IRS. "Another triggered review," he said. "Nothing illegal, but it's time-consuming. I thought you should see it first. From who? Same address as the last two tips, postmarked from Arizona. That narrowed it down. That evening, I stopped by my mother's house to check in. She answered the door holding her reading glasses and motioned me in without a word. We sat on the patio. The air was cooler than usual for late summer. Heard from Jason, I asked. He's at a site in Hillsboro. Should be back by dinner. I think someone's still trying to undermine us. She nodded. Vanessa. Most likely. She sent me a message, my mother said, last week. Asked if I'd speak on her behalf to the board of her new nonprofit. Said she admired how I've reinvented myself. I waited. I didn't reply, she added, but it made me think about how far we've come. She looked down at her lap. I used to think respect came from keeping things beautiful, tidy, controlled. I didn't see that it could grow out of weathering storms together. We sat in silence a while longer. Back at the office, Michael approached me with a folder of design options for the new mixed-use site in Westwood. Affordable housing on one side, green retail on the other. This one's my favorite, he said, pointing to a layout with open-air courtyards and solar panels built into the siding. It's ambitious, but realistic, he said, and people notice. He paused. I also had a call from a contact at the Planning Commission. Vanessa submitted a proposal last week. Very similar language, same neighborhood, just less grounded. He handed me a second sheet. Seems she's still following our blueprints. Jason returned later that week from Hillsboro and dropped off a set of inspection notes on my desk. They were detailed, precise, and labeled clearly site elevation concerns, plumbing discrepancies, vendor delays. I flipped through the packet and looked up at him. This is good, I said. Really good. He gave a small shrug. I've had some help. I know, I said. That weekend, our team attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Thomas Matthews Community Center. It was the first major development completed entirely under our updated partnership model. Michael had handled the environmental layout. Jason had coordinated the labor timeline. Our mother had secured a community grant for the teen apprenticeship wing. We stood side by side under the white tent, each of us holding a corner of the commemorative banner. Camera crews captured the moment. Local reporters asked a few quiet questions. Later that night, as the crowd cleared and the lights came down, I stayed behind to walk the site. Jason joined me halfway across the parking lot. Did you ever think, he said, this place would come together like that? Never me either. We walked slowly along the sidewalk bordering the property. The exterior lights of the center were already on, casting long shadows across the courtyard. They're going to use the north wing for mentoring programs, I said. After school, weekend workshops. Dad would have liked that. We stopped beside the engraved stone near the entry path. Thomas Matthews' hands built this. Hearts kept it standing. Jason touched the corner of the plaque, then stepped back. Sometimes I wonder, he said, if Vanessa really did care. Even a little. I didn't answer. I think about what she said, how she looked at me. I keep trying to find the part that felt real. Maybe that's not the right part to look at, I said. He nodded once, then turned toward the parking lot. As he walked away, I watched the lights from the entryway cast a wide beam down the sidewalk, just wide enough for someone to walk back through if they ever chose to. The weeks that followed brought a surprising sense of calm, but beneath it lay the lingering weight of what had come before. The office buzzed quietly with ongoing projects, but the tension we had endured left its mark on all of us. Jason and I worked side by side, though the distance between us felt smaller now, more bridged by unspoken understanding than anything we had said out loud. One afternoon, Michael Caldwell came into my office with a letter in hand, his expression guarded. "This arrived for you today," he said, placing the envelope gently on my desk. It was from a local community group interested in partnering with Matthews Construction on affordable housing initiatives. They've heard about the scholarship fund and want to get involved. I nodded, grateful for the sign that our work was starting to ripple beyond the company walls. "This is good," I said. "Very good." Despite the small victories, the past still echoed in unexpected ways. A few days later, a former Caldwell Properties employee reached out with information details that confirmed just how calculated the takeover attempt had been. They shared internal emails revealing the plan's timeline, Vanessa's role, and the pressure applied to Jason to keep me sidelined. Jason read through the documents with a pale face. I had no idea how deep it went, he said quietly. "They used me." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "They did. But you're here now, and we're moving forward." In the midst of rebuilding, family dynamics continued to shift. My mother made efforts to bridge the gap with Jason, attending meetings and community events alongside us. While the wounds weren't fully healed, there was a willingness finally to move toward reconciliation. One evening, as we gathered for a board meeting, my father's letter was read again. This time it was not just a reminder of his hopes, but a call to action. We reviewed company policies, discussed plans for growth, and mapped out how to honor his legacy through new projects that balanced profitability with community responsibility. I found myself feeling more grounded than I had in months. The fight to protect what my father built was no longer just about business. It was about healing, about reclaiming our family's strength and purpose. Jason, too, seemed more at peace. He spoke openly about his mistakes and his hopes for a different path, one where he could contribute without pretense or pressure. The turning point came unexpectedly when Vanessa reached out requesting a meeting. I was hesitant but agreed. Our conversation was tense but surprisingly honest. She spoke of regrets of realizing how much was lost in the fight for control. "I was blinded," she said. "I thought the company was the prize, not the people." I listened. Not for reconciliation, not yet, but to understand the full circle of what had unfolded. That night, as I looked out over the city skyline from my office window, I reflected on how far we had come. From the humiliation of that kitchen table at the wedding to this moment of fragile truce, the journey was far from over, but it was ours to shape. I knew challenges remained, but I also knew something essential had shifted. The true work of family and legacy was beginning not in the contracts or the deals, but in trust, forgiveness, and the hope of something better. And with that hope, I prepared to face whatever came next. 1 year after the storm had passed, Matthews Construction gathered to dedicate the new community center in my father's name. The air inside the finished building was bright and warm, filled with the quiet murmur of neighbors, clients, and employees who had weathered so much together. I stood at the front with Jason and our mother, each of us holding a memory of what we had lost and what we had managed to save. Jason had grown into his new role with an ease I hadn't expected, letting his empathy and steady presence shape the way we served our clients. Our mother, once so guarded, smiled with a gentleness I rarely saw in the early days. She worked closely with the foundation, now always eager to hear new stories, never missing a chance to praise the young apprentices, learning their trade in the building that bore her husband's name. Michael Caldwell was there too, standing off to one side with his team, reviewing energy reports and double-checking that every detail matched our promises to the neighborhood. He nodded when I caught his eye, no words needed between us, only respect earned the hard way. Even the wounds left by Vanessa and Richard Caldwell, though slow to heal, had begun to fade. The last legal threat dissolved quietly as Caldwell Properties was sold to new investors. Vanessa left town, and though I sometimes thought of that moment in the kitchen, I found no bitterness left, just a memory filed away with so many others. After the speeches ended and the crowd thinned out, I slipped away to the quiet of my father's old office, now set up for scholarship interviews. The sunlight slanted across the desk, touching the picture of him with his first crew, years before I was born. I sat for a while, just listening to the silence, and let myself feel the weight and freedom that came with choosing my own worth. We had survived the betrayal, the humiliation, and the loss. We had learned finally that dignity is not given by family or by titles or by the way others seat you at a table. It's earned by standing firm when the world expects you to shrink. Justice, I realized, often comes quietly, not in the revenge others imagine, but in the slow building of a life where respect is real and earned. As I closed the door to my father's office, I felt peace in my bones, a rare and precious thing. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we had reclaimed it together. If you've ever found yourself questioning your place or fighting to be seen, I hope my story helps you believe that healing is possible even after the deepest hurt. Sometimes the most powerful justice comes in the life you build after the storm. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If this story touched you or brought back memories of your own, I hope you'll stay a while, share your thoughts, or simply listen. You're welcome here.